A life based on a total lie that spanned 10 years and stretched across an entire continent suddenly found itself at a critical crossroads. What does a highly qualified agent do when loyalty to a new, fake family becomes stronger than the oath given to the Secret Service? This story is the agent's own account of his difficult choice. I resigned in 1988. In fact, it was not a voluntary decision, but a forced critical turn, after which there could be no turning back, another fork in fate. I believed that my period of work in the United States was nearing its end, since the period I had originally expected was from 10 to 12 years, and more than 10 had already passed. There was no direct indication of the end of the mission, but in December of 1988, I saw something I never wanted to discover. We had a system of signals that could be set up either by diplomatic staff acting as contacts on my daily route, or by me, in places they passed by, for example on the way from home to the United Nations. My signal point was on the support beam of an elevated railroad overpass in the Queens area. That December morning, as usual, I walked past this place, glancing at it automatically, not expecting anything special, and then I saw a red spot about the size of my fist applied with red paint. It was a signal of extreme danger. It meant that I was under serious threat and had to leave the country immediately. There was a strict protocol of action that prescribed not even returning home, but immediately picking up backup documents hidden in a park in the Bronx and heading to the Canadian border without delay. I was completely unprepared for this development, so I ignored the instructions. I couldn't ignore him completely, but I went to work, boarded the A train, and sat in my work bay all day, staring at the monitor, because I couldn't think of anything but what to do. The reason for this indecision was fatherhood. My little girl named Chelsea was only 18 months old at the time, and I had been there since she was born. I brought her home, watched her grow up, watched her first steps, and she always looked at me with her big eyes full of love. It was at that moment that I, in fact, returned to the human race, because I just fell madly in love with this child. The feeling of love returned to me quite unexpectedly. Many fathers, especially daughters, will understand what happened. I was still aware that I probably needed to go back because of the threat, but I couldn't figure out how to take care of the girl and leave her. I wanted her to grow up and have all the opportunities for a good life. Her mother, originally from South America, had only 4 grades of education, and this significantly complicated the situation. I decided to stall for time. I could, of course, say that I was sick or in the hospital, as I had been doing before when I couldn't get in touch for about 3 weeks. I didn't do anything. It was Monday, and on Thursday, I listened to my usual shortwave communication session where they explained to me in a few sentences, "We have reason to believe that the FBI is on your trail. You need to complete the emergency evacuation procedure, return home immediately." I still had a little time to maneuver because I could have referred to a broken receiver or poor transmission quality, or end up in the hospital again. I gave myself an extra reprieve. Then something happened that completely eliminated my ability to do nothing. It was the only time a Soviet agent came this close to me in the United States. I was waiting for the A train on a dark morning in Queens when a short man in a black raincoat approached me from the right and whispered in my ear with a strong Russian accent, "You have to come back, otherwise you're dead." The phrase, "you're a corpse," can have 2 interpretations. An American would rather say, "you're caught," or "you're going to be arrested," but "you're a corpse" sounded extremely threatening. Now I had to take the situation seriously because I knew about the precedents when they eliminated or tried to eliminate defectors. This obviously raised the stakes, but I convinced myself that it was just an unfortunate wording. However, at that moment, both they and I realized that we both were aware of what was happening. There was no room for guesses anymore. He found me and talked to me, and I knew it. Now I had to act. In the next radio message, I was ordered to carry out an operation using a cash to transfer money and a passport. A park on Staten Island was chosen as the location. I found and described this point, and I have always been praised for my ability to choose easily accessible places, so there was no doubt about it. The only difference in this operation was that it was scheduled at night. This wasn't a problem either because the cache was located about 100 yards away near a fallen tree that was hard to miss. I went to Staten Island and found the signal that meant that the container is stashed. It was a protocol. The person carrying out the transmission left a signal near the place of the bookmark. I should have gone in and just picked it up. I went to get the container because there was money in it. I didn't have to make a final decision right now. I could have thrown away my passport if I wanted to. I was still trying to figure out what to do. I walked to the place, to the tree, shone the flashlight I had brought with me, since the park was deserted and dark even during the day, and did not find the container. It was supposed to be in a flattened butter can, which was quite large and impossible to miss. I double-checked and looked around carefully, trying to figure out if they had the wrong place, but I still couldn't find it. It was the only failure of such an operation, and it didn't make any sense. As I walked away from this place, I said emotionally to myself, "I'm staying." This decision was made for me, as if some higher power had prompted me. Today, I know that I am a Christian, and I believe that it was a sign from above. At that moment, in that place, it was decided.
To back up my refusal with a convincing explanation that fate helped me find, I sent them my last letter. Using a secret letter, I informed them that I would very much like to return, but I could not because I had contracted HIV/AIDS. It was the most successful lie because in those days, no one wanted to have AIDS patients in their country. It was a death sentence. I knew that when we were in Moscow, we often laughingly discussed what was happening in the United States, this depraved culture. And now this depraved culture got the better of me, and I said no. My words were convincing enough. I even traced a possible infection to my ex-girlfriend whom I had once reported and whose boyfriend was a drug addict. They believed it. I asked to transfer my dollar savings to my German family. They handed over some of it, but informed my family that I had already died. They were absolutely sure of my death, and the agent who transferred the money, according to my assumption, appropriated half of it for himself. That's all. For the next 3 months, I tried not to show up at the same time in the same place. I traveled to work by different routes and at different times, taking precautions, so to speak. These were not grandiose measures, but they helped me keep my sanity. And of course, after sending the letter, I threw the shortwave receiver into the Hudson River and destroyed the one-time cipher notes I still had. Now I was ready for a new life, to live the rest of my days as an American, undisclosed, and to start building my version of the American dream. The first step was to tell my wife, the mother of my child, who always dreamed of owning her own house, we need to buy a house. A year later, we moved to the suburbs, and then I said we needed another child, and we had another child. My career was going well. I changed my place of residence several times, ending up in a large, luxurious house, although before that, our second home was in Pennsylvania, in rural areas. That's where the FBI found me. How did they know about me? This happened thanks to defector Vasily Mitrokhin, who worked as an archivist in the archives of the KGB. He held a fairly high position responsible for moving the archive from Lubyanka to Yasenevo and deeply hated the Soviet system. I remember that his son was seriously ill and he could have received treatment in England, but he was not allowed to leave with his son. This hatred pushed him to find a way to damage the system. He began copying notes, small handwritten pieces of paper that he had been carrying out for years, hiding in socks and underwear. Then he typed them on a typewriter, put the pieces of paper in a container, and buried them in the cottage. It was around 1992 when the Soviet Union no longer existed. He came to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and talked about what he had. It happened on a day off, and apparently some junior employee was on duty, who replied, "We're not interested in what you have, it's too old." It was a decision that probably cost him his career. After that, Vasily Mitrokhin went to one of the Baltic republics and contacted the British intelligence service MI6, where he was told, "Come in, my friend, have some tea." They managed to take the archive from his dacha to England. As a result, MI6 shared these materials with the FBI. There was very little information about me, literally crumbs. There is an illegal immigrant named Jack Barsky operating in the northeastern United States. If my name was Jim Miller, they wouldn't have found me, but Jack Barsky was easy to find. They checked the Social Security system and found that Jack Barsky had received his Social Security card at the age of 33. Bingo! All they knew was that I was an illegal immigrant and still living there. They didn't know if I was active or not, but they knew that I was a very well-trained agent since I was still there. It took them almost 3 years to investigate my case and observe me from a distance. This was done as a precaution because if I had been active, I definitely would have discovered the surveillance. In fact, 3 months after sending the lying letter, I stopped any activity related to espionage. The FBI was very careful. They were watching me. At one point, I had a house outside the city with a neighbor, and this house was for sale. The FBI bought it, put a couple of agents there, and began to monitor it more closely. There were no signs of my activity, but they remained alert. Eventually, they managed to install a listening device in my kitchen. My wife and I had a strained relationship, a lot of conflicts, and her constant complaints tired me. One day we had an argument in the kitchen, and I decided to use, so to speak, a nuclear weapon to tell her what I sacrificed to stay with her, so that she would understand that I was on her side, that I supported her, and that if something was wrong, it wasn't because I didn't like both of them, Chelsea and Penelope. At the moment when I was saying this, the listening device was working and the FBI heard my confession. I was once a KGB agent, and I left there because I stayed here for you and Chelsea. It also made it clear to the FBI that I was no longer active. They had the full picture. They realized that trying to recruit me would be futile, since as a rule, only active agents are recruited. However, they decided that they had enough reason to be loyal to me because I had a lot of information, albeit outdated, but still important to the FBI.
And then one day, on Friday evening, I was driving home from work, and I was stopped by a traffic police patrol. I was passing through a toll booth on the Hudson River Bridge. He waved at me, and I stopped right where he pointed, and he said, "Could you please pull aside? This is a routine check." I didn't pay much attention to it. By that time, I had already forgotten that I was once a spy. That was in the past. Then he said, "No, could you please get out of the car?" That should have made me suspicious. It's unusual for normal traffic control, but I got out without any problems. At that moment, another man appeared in my field of vision to the right, who showed his ID and said, "FBI, we'd like to talk to you." It was my current friend Joe Riley, who is now the godfather of my youngest daughter, Trinity. He later told me that when I heard this phrase, the blood drained from my face, it turned completely white, but I pulled myself together very quickly. He admitted it himself. They put me in another car where another agent was sitting with a gun strapped to his ankle. It was very serious. My first question was, "Am I under arrest?" The answer was no. My instinct kicked in, my ability to act under high pressure. And I asked them, "What's been bothering you for so long?" My goal was to defuse the tension, and I saw a smile. We became friends right away. I knew they should like me, and I think I'm a pretty nice person now. When I was brought to the motel they rented, there were 2 wings at right angles. They bought all the rooms in one wing, put guards on both sides, and took me to a room in the middle. There were some props, folders with notes. I immediately thought it was pretty stupid, but I noticed that all these notes related to my early years. I realized that they didn't know much. I told Joe about it later, although it probably wasn't the best idea, but I took the initiative myself. Before the interrogation began, I made the following statement. I know that the only way for me and my family to get through all this with minimal losses is 100% cooperation, and that's exactly what I intend to do. We spent about 2 hours in the interrogation. I was allowed to call my wife and tell her that I would be late, which already indicated that I would be released. 2 hours later, I was actually released, but the whole area was surrounded by a lot of people. The head of this group talked to me and said, "If you're thinking of running, we're monitoring all the intersections in the area. You won't succeed." I didn't say anything because I had no intention of running. That's how a new stage of my life began, when I started cooperating with the FBI, lived undercover for several more years until I received full-fledged documents, and became an American citizen 7 years ago. The bureaucratic procedures took a long time to figure out how to make me real without putting me in a witness protection program in order to keep my name and legalize everything officially. For example, I had to change the year of birth. If I, Jack Barsky, had kept my 1944 birthday, the FBI would have helped me commit the crime, because I would have been able to receive Social Security 4 years earlier. All these details took a long time. When I finally got a call from the Department of Homeland Security office, the lady said, "This is Agent so-and-so from the Department of Homeland Security. Can you come to the office tomorrow?" I replied, "Let me take a look at my calendar," and then corrected himself. "Wait, what am I talking about? What time do you want me to come?" I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I was sworn in right there at the same hour. It was a great feeling to come out of there because I had a country again. And I love this country, despite all its shortcomings and the problems we're going through right now. And then the last event that happened that changed my life again. I never wanted to become a public figure, but I was discovered through a chain of unlikely connections. It was related to a relative, my wife's half-brother, who lives in Germany. His mother came to visit someone, not us, but this someone he was visiting lived only 50 miles from our house. My wife and this stepbrother had never met in person. They knew about each other through social media. When he found out about my past, when he was a conductor on the German railway, he said, "Oh, this is a big story. It's going to be very, very, very loud."
It so happened that he knew a man who knew one of the star reporters of the German magazine Der Spiegel. After she conducted her own investigation and made sure that I was real, she took up my case, and then coincidentally, she knew Steve Croft, a reporter for the 60 Minutes program. Do you see how these dots connected? I had nothing to do with it. That's how life works. Sometimes the dots connect on their own. I've probably just been lucky a few times in my life. It was a very interesting trip. I'm still shaking my head remembering everything that happened. If you are interested in the phenomenon of deep cover agents, subscribe to the channel and write your opinion in the comments. What do you think is the most difficult thing in life under a false name?